Welcome, everybody. As Acti would say, grab a seat in the arena. We have our guest, Houman, coming on about a minute. I see him in the crowd. But yeah, we have a day of action-packed AMAs coming up. We have Mr. Houman here at noon, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have Phantom Wallet coming on. And then we're going to cap off the day with a gelato. So, yeah, it's been a pretty busy week for us. I think we've done, probably averaged like 4 AMAs a day this last week. And next week isn't going to be any less busy. I think we're also averaging 4, looking at the calendar, and some days we have even 5 AMAs. Houman, welcome to the stage.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm glad that we finally got you on. And Houman, before we get started, do you want to give our audience a quick background to yourself, your career path, how you ended up at NYU, all the good stuff, and then we can kind of dive into the world of legality when it comes to the field of blockchain.
Yeah, sure. I'm originally from California, out in New York now. I was a practicing lawyer, but always interested in policy issues. Kind of got into financial regulation when the financial crisis hit. And then that took me to academia and research. Always had an interest in technology, of course. And then when kind of blockchain came about and Bitcoin and all the good stuff, that really got me interested in appreciative of the real importance of technology to finance, law, and potentially anything. And that got me eventually to, of course, once you go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, you don't go back. And that got me into Web3 more generally, of course, as is the case recently. And consistent with that, I really got excited about what's possible with startups and the startup economy. Basically, I saw an interview with a VC before I knew what VCs were. And he's saying basically it's never been a better time to start a company than right now. And that was 10 years ago. And even as well, I got really into the no-code revolution and became a fanatic of Bubble, building software without code. And that's kind of where I am now in terms of like what I'm really promoting and researching and doing on the entrepreneurial side is no code, but for Web3. And that's where I am with ICB, startup I co-founded.
Okay, so definitely want to get to that. Definitely want to get to ICB because building without code excites me. And I've talked extensively on this channel about how AI is going to, how AI is going to augment human creativity and also allow for the tapping of untapped human creativity for those that might not be able to express themselves, whether it's in the form of writing, as we're seeing with GPT, or in the form of code, in the form of building either a video game or a DeFi protocol,
yep,
or any sort of. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I just say yes, all yes to all that.
Yes. So Houman, really quick, just to take a few steps back. You said that learning about Bitcoin was what initially inspired you to focus your legal career on blockchain and cryptocurrency. I'm curious to know a bit more about that. So was it just Bitcoin that piqued your interest, or was it just a combination of Bitcoin and other crypto assets and blockchain potential that really made you make the jump over?
Yeah, I mean, really the potential of all of the coins. Bitcoin was kind of the start for me, at least. When I got into crypto, Bitcoin was obviously, this was like 2013, right? So Bitcoin was there. Ethereum was not released yet. People were talking about things like colored coins, and things like that, alternative uses, alt chains, early days. But yeah, in terms of being a lawyer, I think it's always good to try to be on the cutting edge of issues. and focusing on areas that other people may not specialize in, may not have the technical wherewithal to get into finance or accounting and technology. And I definitely think that in all aspects of life, focusing on technology is always going to be a good thing, regardless of how far AI goes. Having the technology side is just a real boost to one's, I think, career and mentality in terms of learning that side of anything. And so, yeah, certainly Bitcoin and then just crypto more generally is, I think, such an exciting space. It's where so much cool innovation is happening. And, as I've said on social media, is amazing as AI is and as transformative as AI is going to be for our world, including in the no code respect, because you can build apps just by talking about them. We still need Web3 to solve the problem of digital ownership and transferability. AI does not solve that. And that's why crypto and Web3 is definitely here to stay.
Mm-hmm. And piggyback, excuse me, got a little, I'm still a little recovering for a bit of a cold, so excuse me if I have to clear my throat. But I want to know more about what you see as the most exciting developments that are going to come out of Web3 over the next 3 to 5 years. What paradigms do you see shifting?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see the combination of Web3 and no code, being really exciting, as well as having everything on chain. So one thing I like a lot about the Internet Computer blockchain is that it tries to put everything on chain, including the front end, the graphics. So you can play a game on chain and see like the website hosted on blockchain and so on and so forth, storage on chain. And so I think that's really exciting, going towards a world of basically Web3 maximalism. So you don't have to compromise. You don't have to have anything off chain, basically on chain or it didn't happen, right? As well as things like zero knowledge proofs, homomorphic encryption, that I think are really exciting, that my colleagues have got me into as well, as really being able to make it possible for companies to do business anonymously, essentially.
And Houman, I know we've seen a lot of negative news recently, kind of the American regulators coming pretty hard at crypto. I would love to know what you believe are going to be, as blockchain, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin become more mainstream, what you believe some of the legal challenges are going to be. What have you seen emerge? And then what steps do you think need to be taken to address these challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely the perennial question for years now has been, what is the scope of the Securities and Exchange Commission's authority with respect to digital assets, cryptocurrencies? In other words, what constitutes a security? What constitutes a securities transaction? From some people's point of view, basically everything except for Bitcoin is a security, or maybe Ethereum or something. And therefore, everything needs to be regulated under the auspices of the SEC. All crypto exchanges would have to be required as securities broker dealers, securities exchanges. So I think that's the main thing that has to happen. But I think that as the economy becomes further tokenized, or as you say, as crypto becomes more mainstream, at some point Congress is going to have to draw the line and say, this is what is a security by statute, and these digital assets are not securities by statutes. And I think the tricky part, but the most important part in drawing that line, will be the recognition that just because something is investable and liquid and tokenized does not make it a security, because soon everything will be tokenized, including services, and you can invest in people's services and their name and their brand, right, with personal tokens of various kinds. So soon, if not now, basically everything is a token. Any asset, any good, any store of value can be tokenized. There's no way the SEC can regulate the entire economy. So Congress has to come back and say, okay, well, what's the predominant purpose of this transaction or this asset? Is it just to be invested in, or is it something else, utilitarian, apart from a financial use case? So I think that's very important. And I think that, yes, in a bear market, it's easy for regulators to kind of clamp down. You may have heard the phrase Operation Choke Point, where banking regulators are trying to cut off the crypto economy from the more traditional banking sector as well. And so that's something to watch over. But overall, I think to some extent, the crypto markets welcome some kind of reasonable regulation as long as it doesn't go far because it provides certainty. Because what we can't do is live day by day right now, where there's always some new, hidden, surprising regulatory enforcement action or proclamation that kind of disrupts the crypto economy.
Yeah, it does seem to me that at least so far the SEC is painting the industry with this arbitrary brush, and it makes it hard for builders, especially builders in the US, to build freely while also adhering to laws that make sense. So hopefully, hopefully we get a bit more clarity and more crystallized um, and I guess what I want to say is hopefully we get better laws that people can adhere to while also being able to build freely, because otherwise innovation leaves the country, and a country that has had years, 200 years of paradigm shifting innovations come out of it. What are your thoughts on other countries that might be doing it better? Uh, let's say Dubai, Singapore, and then the EU more recently with their rollout of MiCA.
Yeah, I mean, I think that innovation has already left the country, or at least not come here, because given the uncertainty, people know that there's a chance they're going to be caught up in some regulatory scheme out here, so they don't even come to the U.S. shores. They don't allow U.S. investors and so forth. But yes, if they clamp down even harder, then people will go to other countries. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think that the crypto lobby, if you will, is rational and strong enough and trying to educate policymakers about the benefits of innovation from a decentralized point of view. But yeah, I think that Singapore, Dubai, and the ones you mentioned, even Europe is better in many ways in terms of jurisdictions for doing business in crypto and allowing retail investors to participate in essentially private financial markets or financial markets more easily without being required to have a company be publicly registered.
Houman, why are we so far behind? I mean, I feel like we should have very intelligent people spearheading this, but it seems that the SEC's kind of been going for the throat. Even more recently with Paxos and BUSD, I always thought
Yeah.
because BUSD was issued by Paxos and because Paxos highly regulated out of New York City, or out of the state of New York rather, then it was one of the most kosher stablecoins out there. What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, Paxos, really advertises the fact that it's so heavily regulated and stable in that respect. But I think what Paxos may be a unique case where where U.S. regulators are trying to clamp down on Binance in particular. But the more general question is, yeah, it does seem like the U.S. is kind of not a leading innovator in this area. I think partially it's a question of history. And because the US financial markets were the earliest to develop, their regulations were the earliest to develop too, but that they developed in such an early time, in the 1930s, that now we're dealing with a situation where we're stuck with these legacy laws. And they're very hard to change, and they don't fit modern assets, the modern economy. Whereas other countries, Singapore and Dubai, don't have this legacy of New Deal, Depression era legislation that they have to try to fit into the global digital economy, and they can move much faster and lighter on their feet, I think. So that is part of the problem. Part of it could just be personalities and politics, but also there are issues with perception and politics. And when there's fraud, when people are losing money just to high risk, even if it's not fraudulent, but the rug pulls and stuff don't help to create a good impression for the economy. If lines were still going up, you wouldn't see as much regulation or a call for regulation. But when people get hit in their pockets, or perhaps worse, then regulators will start to really clamp down on things.
Okay, and that makes sense. We've seen that trend in the past. So you're saying that because the U.S. financial markets are so young and one of the first to ever mature the way that they have, other countries are benefiting from this leapfrog effect just because they're not trying to paint a new innovation, a new asset class with an outdated brush.
Exactly.
So, Houman, smart contracts, they're an increasingly popular use case, obviously, but was curious about the legal questions around
Yeah.
contractual enforceability and liability. How do you see the law evolving to address these challenges as they pertain to smart contracts, and what implications will they have for the use of smart contracts in various industries? I know kind of a long-winded question, but the mic's yours.
No, not at all. Yeah, the phrase smart contracts is probably one of the more unfortunate phrases in blockchain and technology because it does kind of try to tie in this idea of law with technology. And yes, I mean, it makes sense to call automated blockchain, automatically executing blockchain programs that execute based on a condition, contractual in nature, because it basically is like a contract in the sense that if something happens, then you make a payment, for example. But there's nothing inherently legal about smart contracts. They can apply to a wide variety of events that trigger their execution. Now, to answer your question more directly, there's no real problem with enforceability of smart contracts because the law just looks at the intent of the parties. And if the intent of the parties was to use blockchain smart contracts as tools to help perform their contracts, perform their legal obligations, fulfill their duties, and make payments and everything else, that is fully enforceable under the law. And that is true in most jurisdictions that have looked at it. Now, it might be difficult to practically enforce certain aspects of smart contracts or really stop them from executing, because if they execute autonomously on a blockchain and their basically code is immutable and they're unstoppable, that may pose practical problems. But in general, there's no real problem with incorporating and making enforceable the operation and execution of smart contracts.
And what are some of the challenges in enforcing laws with something like crypto, something like smart contracts, where oftentimes the creator of a protocol or the writer of a smart contract is anonymous, or they may be in another country? I just feel like it gets pretty murky very quick.
Yeah, I think some of the problems are, first of all, the immutability of them. So if you need a certain condition to get the money, and on the other hand, if the signatures are met or the conditions are met and payment will execute, once that's hard coded in a smart contract, there's no way to change it. So regular legal contracts are fairly flexible because parties can come back and renegotiate them. And they can basically stop something from happening, stop the payments, stop the workflows from an operational perspective. But you can't really do that, or not as easily, at least, with smart contracts. So there may be money stuck in an escrow account that no one can move, or someone may be unable to stop payments from taking place or against some kind of operation. So that's one practical difficulty where code becomes law, and that code is not stoppable one way or the other. And that's why I think people have been hesitant to adopt full-blown automation via smart contract in their business-to-business relations, even day-to-day, because they are basically unstoppable. Once you sign it, once you put it out there in the world, you can't reverse it. And people may not be that willing to do that. Now, in terms of other types of regulatory and legal challenges to crypto more generally, including being anonymous, I would say there's a couple more. One is that crypto tends to be decentralized by nature. So if you can create a truly decentralized, let's say, financial exchange, crypto exchange, whatever, that's not regulable. Regulators can't regulate that because there's no one to regulate. It's just autonomous software that exists on multiple people's computers all around the world, it's very difficult, at least, to come down and shut down those nodes. So regulation typically operates on the basis and presumption of there being a singular, centralized legal entity, an exchange, a broker, a bank to regulate. And that's subject to regulation and record keeping and disclosure requirements. And none of that is the case with a true end-to-end decentralized exchange or a decentralized network. There's no single point of regulation. So that can pose a really big challenge, especially when front ends become decentralized. And then really everything is decentralized end to end, end to end. And there's really no one to shut down except the node providers themselves. Add on top of that, as you mentioned, anonymity aspects of things. Even if there's no one to come after, it makes it even harder, let's say, to go after any person to regulate or hold liable, civilly or criminally, for software that may facilitate activities that governments do not like or are in fact bona fide illegal. So that is going to pose another challenge going forward, I think, for blockchains, as blockchains become more anonymous, as Web3 identity solutions become more robust, and as everything goes on chain, which I predict it will be for better and certainly for worse to stop online or on-chain activities that are not good, that are illegal and illicit, or at least that should be regulated if they take place, and it's going to pose a major challenge for governments.
I'm going to use a couple examples here and kind of push back on your. So you're saying that if a protocol is decentralized, it's going to be very hard to go after a single entity. But as we've seen with Uniswap, for example, and Hayden Adams, or even Tornado Cash, like they might not be able to, excuse me, they might not be able to go after the protocol, but they'll go after the I guess the founder, the main developer.
Yes, after developers, so that's where anonymity comes in, as you mentioned. So what I'm assuming is an end-to-end decentralized app or network, as well as anonymous developers.
Okay, got it.
But for Uniswap also, though, they can go after the front end. Okay, they can basically block everyone from being able to interact with it, except through perhaps some kind of a command line interface. But that's when it comes to things like the internet computer or other networks that can host the front end on chain. Now we're in a whole new era, in my opinion, because now the front end is also decentralized. You cannot block the website anymore. And then I think it's going to be much more challenging for regulators.
Yeah, indeed. And so they would go after the front end by basically talking to the ISPs?
Yes, right. That's what they do right
now. Okay, got it. So moving on, I wanted to pick your brain about the debate that has gone on for years about the potential for blockchain and cryptocurrency to disrupt traditional financial systems. What do you see as the most promising use cases for assets? Well, I'm going to reframe this. What do you see for promising use cases for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and stablecoins to be integrated into existing financial frameworks while still maintaining regulatory compliance?
Okay, so so for Bitcoin, I definitely see it as a type of a digital store of value as well as a payments mechanism. Ethereum, I say, will probably become a global settlement layer for financial transactions or other types of transactions, given its highly decentralized nature. At least it used to be, I think maybe before the upgrade, but that's TBD. And then stablecoins, as well. I think stablecoins will be this universally adopted form of digital money or digital cash that means that we don't need CBDCs and that everyone can transact in stablecoins. I think get most of the benefits of crypto without the volatility.
Do you see a future where countries start to, this is something that I've been speculating on, and one of the students that I spoke to, David from Blockchain at BT, brought up yesterday as well. Do you see governments starting to add Bitcoin to their reserves to hedge against the US dollar, or countries using Bitcoin to circumvent sanctions, as we saw it with Russia, I believe, and even Ukraine, to get not circumventing sanctions, but using Bitcoin to circumvent some sort of barrier, some sort of financial barrier. That's the first part of the question. The other part of the question is, do you see countries becoming so, I guess, not reliant, but becoming so invested in Bitcoin where they start to develop their own mining arms?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, bear markets aside, I see there's just a continuing proliferation of crypto. I mean, I think crypto and Web3 are inevitable. There's just no way to stop it. There's no way to shut it down. And it is the only way to basically move forward in innovation that is decentralized and not monopolized by big tech or big governments. At the same time, because the dollar is becoming less of the world's reserve currency, from my understanding, governments will be looking to add and diversify their portfolio of currency holdings, including crypto, and being a part of those networks with cryptocurrency miners. So what I do think could be a major danger, in fact, is if a government buys up a massive part of the token supply of a network. That could then we're really talking about governance, and really, because once they understand what's at stake here, where basically buying tokens means buying a part of the governance of the digital infrastructure of the future, which I think it will be. We have to be careful to actually keep these networks decentralized without major players in terms of governments that are becoming stakers and governments that are otherwise have large holdings of tokens, and therefore can vote on a lot of things, perhaps disproportionately.
So, kind of the last question I had before we move on to the next segment of the broadcast was about financial inclusion. One of the ethos, or part of the ethos, of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin was for its potential to promote financial inclusion and also empower individuals who lack access to these traditional services. So how do you see this tech evolving to address these issues? What role can the legal system play in promoting the rectifying of these issues? And what continents, or what parts of the world do you see benefiting the most? And again, 3-part question.
Yeah, I'll try to take those basically in order. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the evolution of the space, I think is happening, and it's important. In terms of, I do see areas outside the U.S., just to go to the last part of your question, as becoming kind of more important in terms of how it's going to go mainstream and support financial inclusion. Because I say that outside the U.S. because non-U.S. financial markets in many ways still need a lot of development and can benefit the most from decentralized networks that are cheaper, faster, and better, including where you're sending money around the globe very quickly and very easily. To become more mainstream and to actually help with financial inclusion, I do think, though, that things need to become easier and, of course, safer. Because it's still, I think, too easy to maybe get rugged or lose your private keys or access to your wallet, whatever the case may be. And so I think that's very important to become safer and just have a friendlier user interface, just to become more seamless. And I think that is what a lot of companies are really focusing on now, is just making it much more easy to use and safer to use. To get into the crypto economy and therefore benefit from financial inclusion. So I think the benefit for the financial inclusion purposes are just being able to access financial services you can ordinarily not access, new ones as well, and certainly cheaper and faster, and sharing some of those profits with yourself, or taking some of those profits, earning some of those profits, rather than centralized institutions. I mean, what I do think is really inclusive about Web3 is that users of platforms can benefit directly and get paid. So all the users of Facebook that made Facebook what it is today, of course, would be much better off if they could share more proportionally in the success of Facebook as a public company, rather than a much smaller select group of owners.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more with that last point. And I lied. I have a few more questions about as part of the segment before we move on to the work that you've done. What are your thoughts on Bitcoin being adopted as legal tender? I know that El Salvador was the first to take that leap forward. You think it's a good thing, or do you think that developed countries, first world countries, for lack of a better term, are probably going to be less incentivized to do something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that's difficult. I think that national economies can benefit from cryptocurrencies, but maybe a stablecoin is the better way to go, rather than something that's more volatile natively. And so, yeah, as you mentioned, I think adding stablecoins to the reserves, accepting a legal tender is good. I certainly think that accepting Bitcoin as legal tender as an option is probably a good thing overall for countries to give their citizens, the ability to make it easier to transact in Bitcoin and other crypto. I don't know necessarily if I would privilege Bitcoin in that respect over others, given the speed of the network and some of the cost of the fees sometimes. But I think the volatility of it could be risky and dangerous to people if they put their savings in it. So I would certainly urge some caution there.
Houman, I've been in this space since 2017 and late 2017, and I've never stopped hearing about Tether FUD. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on Tether, and do you think they'll eventually implode? Do you think that the reserves are fake, or rather part of it's fake, or do you think that Tether's probably going to be around for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an auditor and that type of thing myself, including with respect to Tether and its assets. I think it will be around, if only for no other reason than if it was going to go bust, it would have done so already. If it's the fact that it could withstand the financial pressures of last year, even including early this year, says a lot, I think, about what they're doing in terms of their assets, their reserves, and the risk management practices. And I think that the sooner they're more transparent, certainly the better. And I say similar to Binance, and Binance was able to withstand so many withdrawals. So it's likely the case that they are, in fact, fully reserved and backed. Same goes for other exchanges as well. So that's, I do think it's going to be around, because if it wasn't, it probably would have imploded already.
What are your thoughts on privacy coins like Monero and Zcash? Do you think if they get big enough, global powers will come after them?
Yeah, I mean, there is that interesting question. Once things become truly anonymous and global and economically significant, I do think that there may be some kind of preemptive crackdown against, let's say, hardcore privacy coins or privacy networks. That being said, I use something called non-fungible identity, because I think that is a very solid approach, and in fact, in some respects, better than others, to anonymous Web3 logins and wallets and all that. So I think that can be very practical to have your decentralized anonymous identity on Web3, and I do think they're going to become much more important, to be sure.
Tell us a bit more about that. How does that work?
Yeah, NFID, non-fungible identity, is a Web3 identity system that is built on top of internet identity, which itself is part of what's called the Web3 authentication standard that W3C passed. And from what I know of it, it is anonymous or pseudonymous, and the primary benefit is that it uses a biometric authentication. So all I do is use my finger to log in, and that's it. I think that's really helpful. And that's that's the main benefit I know from it. And it also, sorry, one more thing is that it uses in an anonymous way your Google ID, believe it or not, your Gmail ID. You can use that to log in anonymously because every time you do so, essentially it creates a new kind of token that's not used again. So it kind of combines the benefits of both worlds.
And last question before we start talking about the work you've done. What advice would you give young lawyers or law students who are interested in pursuing a career in blockchain and crypto law? And what do you believe are the most important skills and qualities for success in this field?
I think the most important skills and qualities is to view yourself as a builder first and a lawyer second. So become obviously the best expert lawyer in this area, know how all the laws and regulations apply, are changing, the players involved, the dynamics. But really, you want to bring to the table the credibility of someone that's also an entrepreneur, also a technologist who knows what's under the hood and how companies are looking to make money, including in non-obvious ways, like know what yield farming is, for example. Know what types of decentralized identifiers are out there. So I really think putting on the hat of a builder and bringing along that legal expertise can go a long way towards building credibility with clients or potential clients, because you have to walk the walk and talk the talk and not just be a lawyer who happens to apply the law to crypto. It's good to be part of the crypto Web3 industry as well.
Mm-hmm. Houman, you had a startup acquired by DocuSign. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the idea behind that startup that I co-founded, Clause, was, hey, let's try to take smart contracts and bring them into the mainstream legal practice, and to take the contracts that are full of rich data and have obligations that are obviously in principle can be automated. And the idea there was to say, okay, well, there's all these terms and conditions and contracts, and they can, in principle, be automated as between two different companies primarily. And so if we can just make these digital native legal agreements, connect them to different payments and other types of performance systems online, primarily just to make it easier, then there's a lot of value to be gained in automating payments and shipments and deliveries and penalties and things like that. So that was the approach we took. A lot of law firms and companies were very interested in it. And it is, in a sense, like DocuSign and steroids, which is why they acquired the company, because it takes the vision of digital contracts to the next level to automate them. Now, to automate the performance of contracts. But we tried to use blockchain. It wasn't ready for smart legal contracts, contract automation. It's been Ethereum, at least in its public incarnation. So because of the scalability, high gas fee issues, and some of the privacy issues as well. That is also why I'm interested in the internet computer ecosystem, because I do believe that it has this vision of a world computer in many ways done correctly. And it can store and process legal agreements and all the data affordably and securely, privately, on chain.
And how long was the process of building this out? And
yeah, so the startup Clause, until it was acquired, it was about 3.5 years, I believe, 4. So that's how long that took. And that was a really exciting time. As a lawyer, law professor, I learned so much. Had an awesome co-founder about startups and about tech, financing and venture capital and having employees and everything like that. When you're a lawyer as a co-founder of a company, you automatically become the company's general counsel. So I learned so much about commercial agreements, financial agreements, NDAs, of course, software licensing, all those types of things. So as a lawyer, I'd certainly, as I said, be a good lawyer, learn all about software licensing, open source agreements, open source licenses. Those are all bread and butter to what a technology lawyer should know and what a crypto lawyer should know as well.
Houman, what kind of work do you do for Codex?
Yeah, for Stanford Codex, I'm a fellow there. I first started what's called a legal APIs project, because one thing that I learned a lot about through doing no code was the importance of APIs to building software. APIs, that does require some technical understanding of how APIs work. That goes beyond visual development. So it's not code, but it's not also drag and drop stuff. But then I realized, that there's so many APIs for law and legal and that are relevant to the practicing and of law and making law automated. Whether it's data about what governments or APIs about like what government standards may apply to, of course, APIs that are relevant to transactions and contracts. And so I first started the legal APIs project to really explore what types of APIs are out there in law and relevant to law, as well as to just categorize those. And if you go to the Programmable Web website, there's like hundreds, if not thousands, that are legally relevant, at least to however you want to define laws, whether it's legislation, court opinions, or transactions. And I did a no code demo where I basically made a search engine pulling from the Harvard Case Law Access Project using Bubble to pull from their API, which has all of the case law basically uploaded into it. And so that was what I did for that project at Stanford Codex. And then the more recent one is the no code law, the no code legal one, because I just see no code as so important to all software, including crypto and law, legal tech. Going forward, and that project is exploring and showing how you can do no code applications for law, which should be obvious at this point. And kind of going in on there, and I wrote a paper called what I call meta software. So my conceptualization of no code software is basically it's not actually software in a sense. It's not an app, right? It's a meta layer that it's like a blank slate. You can build software on top of these meta software canvases like Bubble and other no code platforms. And ultimately, Web3 and crypto is kind of like the back end side of that, where you're not tied to a particular network necessarily because it's all open and not controlled and permissionless in that sense. And I've written actually 2 articles about that. One is published by MIT called Software is Scholarship. And another one more recently that's called Meta Software, where I view software as something that's capable of expressing ideas beyond just prose. And so no-code software makes that really much more tangible.
And this leads into ICB Labs. Give us a high-level overview of ICB Labs. I mean, you've already kind of explained it's a no-code builder for Web3.
Yeah, really, it's if you think about, whether it's WordPress for Web3 or Bubble for Web3, there's just this idea that the major blocker for building on Web3 or building software in general is the ability to know how to code. And it could be JavaScript and CSS, traditional software development, or it could be Rust and Solidity for Web3. And so there's this huge gap between the people that want to do things and build new projects on Web3 and the people that can do them because they don't know how to code or can't afford coders. And the whole point of the no-code movement generally is to, in a sense, reduce the need for coders. So you never have to hire a coder again because all that stuff is abstracted away and automated. And we're seeing that come radically true with AI. That writes the code for you. But really, these no-code software platforms write the code for you too and maintain it on the back end. It makes it infinitely easier to build software. And so I always was experimenting with no-code crypto projects. Like I went and figured out a way to use Bubble to make a call to like a Hyperledger Fabric private blockchain and basically store some data, send some data there, and bring it back to the regular Web 2 app that I made with no code. And so I really, dive deep into see what platforms are out there into being able to build on Web3 without coding. And I found that ICB was really the only one that is full end-to-end blockchain decentralized. And I joined the project as a co-founder after Wyatt Benno started it. And it is what we're trying to do is basically build everything 100% without compromise, websites, front ends included, but of course, smart contracts and everything too, on-chain without coding. And right now you can build pretty decent looking websites entirely on-chain. And because it's all on-chain, we don't know who you are. So if you've made an account right now and started building a website, we could not know who you are. We could also not take it down because it's unstoppable. It's on blockchain in that respect. Unless you told us, who you were. People tell us who they are because they want help, of course, with trying to build things. And the evolution of ICB will be to make things with smart contracts without code, to automate things, tools, and workflows that way. We already have an NFT builder. We integrated with Web 2 to be able to sell NFTs and things with credit card. And we're also bringing about some zero knowledge proof, ZKP stuff, with no code templates that'll fill a massive gap in the market. Because right now, to use ZKP to build it, you obviously have to know how to code as well.
Okay, so some questions. One, when you say it deploys, you have it deploy websites on chain. Which chains are compatible with ICB currently?
Yeah, right now, currently, it's the Internet Computer blockchain only. In part because there's very few blockchain networks that can host on the front ends. There's Arweave, there's IPFS, and certainly others as well, but not too many.
So as of now, in this period of the growth cycle, it's able to take in parameters and then spit out a website. The ultimate goal is for it to be able to take in a bunch of parameters and just like what the user wants, and then be able to spit out a protocol or a DeFi application or an intricate NFT project, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, and DAOs as well. So we're launching a DAO marketplace later this year as well. We also built through ICB Labs an on-chain search engine called Kinnic, KINIC.io, and that searches all content currently on the Internet Computer blockchain, where we're going to expand it to other on-chain content like IPFS and Arweave as well. And it exists on-chain, and that's what we're going to create into a DAO later this year and launch Kinnic tokens so people can govern how the search engine is, how it develops over time.
Mm-hmm. Is there a cost to use this?
Not right now. No, right now Kinnic is free. We're looking for revenue models, but ultimately the DAO will determine that, because once it converts to a DAO, it will be fully decentralized and on-chain.
I meant ICB.
Yes, ICB. Yes, ICB. Yes, it costs you about. If you use credit cards, it's gonna be $50 a month. If you use tokens, it comes to about 25.
Okay, and when you say token, is it a native token or is it the ICP token?
Yes, ICP token.
Cool. And I suppose I'm trying to get my head around the final goal for the full complete alpha version of ICB.
Yeah.
Be something that allows people to even build the Web3 game.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, 100%. Games, on-chain media, without coding. And right now it's like WordPress or an online website builder. You go to it, you add the elements to the page, the heading, the titles, the images, whatever, and then you click deploy to blockchain, and it takes that whatever you built and pushes it to blockchain, so it's stored out there.
Mm-hmm. Any other projects you're working on?
That's keeping me quite busy at the time. That is it.
Anything about ICB that I haven't asked that you, or might have skipped over, that you find important to share?
We're excited about the zero knowledge proof stuff that we're bringing to market pretty soon, because it's going to be no code. And that's really exciting to open up the market for who can use zero knowledge proofs for whatever purposes, but also, just in general, just to build your own on-chain web presence, get off of anything Web2 related, any of those kind of website builders. Why not build on chain?
You've mentioned zero knowledge proof several times during the course of this broadcast. What excites you most about that tech?
Yeah, so what excites me most is that it allows companies, from a business to business perspective, I'm thinking about it. And what excites me the most is that it allows companies really to do business without having to be concerned about sharing confidential or proprietary information, because they can verify only what they need to verify, and that's it. And also, in conjunction with, we're also using, I think I'm equally excited about what's called fully homomorphic encryption, which says, here's my data in encrypted form, and you can go ahead and process it, but you're never going to see the actual data itself. I mean, in some respects, that may be more important than ZKP, because it says, yeah, we can build APIs to each other, integrate our data with each other, but just because you see my data doesn't mean, just because you use my data doesn't mean you can see it. And that, I think, is exciting, and another Web3 oriented kind of benefit.
Mm-hmm. And what is your hypothesis on when we'll see the true power of ZK tech rolled out and being used on a day-to-day basis?
Give us till next year, and we'll do it. We're going to roll out our prototypes in a few months, but to dominate the world, it might take a few more. So check it back with ICB at the end of the year. There's a lot of great projects out there in ZK world, to be sure. In fact, in terms of other protocols, ICB, we're part of the Mina event happening in Asia, I think next in March, to do some ZK work.
I love Mina Protocol. I was part of their early testing.
Yeah, Mina is really cool.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you threw that out there. I'm a Mina shill, and so I'm glad I'm not the only one. Don't sleep on Mina, guys. Not financial advice, but definitely check them out. So, Houman, the last thing I want to talk about is your position as a professor at NYU Law School. How long have you been doing that for? I'm curious to learn more about what you're teaching there and your career on that end.
Yeah, it's actually New York Law School in Tribeca, a separate school. I've been there since 2009. And believe it or not, I teach a lot of blockchain and crypto stuff. I mean, I teach contracts, I teach commercial law, which in relatively traditional ways, especially for contracts, but I include technology stuff. And in my commercial law class, which is just like business law in some respects, I teach everything from payments to digital payments to NFTs, everything about crypto, of course, and DeFi as well. So I incorporate all of those into my traditional mainstream courses, so students who have really no idea of what those things are get a good background in them.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had New York laws written down in my brain for whatever reason, read NYU. But are these classes only available to law students, or can others audit your classes?
Yeah, they're only available to law students.
And how long have you been there for, you said?
Since 2009. It's about 14 years.
2009. And do you find that in academia, blockchain courses on blockchain tech and curriculum on blockchain tech is becoming more and more accepted and more broadly taught?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we did a Bitcoin conference in 2014 or 13 even, and people thought it was nutty. And there were some nutty people that showed up, to be sure. But now, crypto and everything is very mainstream in academia. At least from a critical perspective, it's important enough to criticize and think about how it should be regulated. I mean, all the academics that write about like financial regulation or business regulation will definitely have something probably to say about crypto or Web3. Lots of IP scholars, of course, are talk about NFTs and the impact on copyrights and trademarks.
Mm-hmm. And what are your thoughts, Houman, on the next couple of years? Do you think that we've seen kind of the worst of the market of this bear cycle? Do you think we have more pain? And this is all speculation, obviously. Do you think more pain ahead of us? Or do you think that we're going to start to see another step up in market cap and adoption over the next, let's say, 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's hard to know in the short term, but I definitely think 2 to 3 years, absolutely, we're going to see another bull cycle in terms of prices. I don't know whose prices are going up, but somebody's have to. And it's because of the adoption, because of the mainstreamization. If you look at the headlines, it's still very true that crypto is going mainstream. J.P. Morgan this and Goldman Sachs that. So and all the way down, there's always these new NFT projects, whether it's real estate or something. The DMV putting records on Tezos or what have you. So yeah, I think that it's maybe it's not full speed ahead, but it's definitely going forward. So I definitely see this as potentially being a great time to get into the market. But obviously, who knows? There could be still be some downward trends. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, and the DMB records on Tezos was was a big shocker. Not a shocker in a good way to me. We have Teslas coming on in a couple of weeks, so that should be interesting.
Very
Houman,
nice.
Yeah, it's been a great broadcast. I know you're a busy man. I don't want to keep you any longer. I tried to keep the questions high level and kind of go over a broad spectrum of different ideas when it comes to the law as it pertains to this industry, but also a lot of the great work that you've done. If there's at any point where you want to come and talk about a specific project that you're working on, if you want to do ecosystem deep dive into ICB or talk about the work you're doing at Codex or anything else, you're always welcome on this podium. I really appreciate you coming on. If you have any final words for the community, go ahead and share them now.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining. I hope you found this a great use of your busy time as well. And please keep in touch. DM me, follow me on Twitter, and I'd love to hear more what people are excited about. Any one person like myself only knows so much, so I'm sure there's a lot of exciting projects and building. And I would love to tell you more about the specifics of ICB, ZKP, or Codex projects too. And thanks
Right
so
on.
much for having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure. Whale Coin Talk community, this is another episode of The Aquarium. We had Houman Shadab on today, and my name is Noah. Remember, everything on these broadcasts is meant for educational purposes only. Nothing is financial advice, so be safe out there. We'll see you in about an hour for a Phantom Wallet Deep Dive. Take care.